I'm Soraya, and this is the story of how my husband thought he could outsmart me. It started with whispers in the dark, bank transactions I never made, and a name, Iliamoro, that I had never heard before. Declan, my husband, wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to take everything, but he underestimated me. He thought I would crumble. Instead, I moved first. I protected what was mine. And 1 week later, his entire plan backfired. But what's worse wasn't just the betrayal. It was how long he had been planning it, how many lies he had told, and the lengths he was willing to go to destroy me. I woke up to an empty bed. The cold sheets beside me told me Declan had been gone for a while. At first, I thought maybe he had gone to the bathroom or grabbed a glass of water. But as I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I caught the faint sound of his voice. Low, hushed, careful. The hallway light was off, but a sliver of moonlight streamed through the window, casting shadows across the floor. My stomach twisted as I followed the sound. Just a little longer. She doesn't suspect anything yet. I stopped mid-step. My breath hitched. Declan's voice was smooth, reassuring, like he was calming someone down. My heart pounded against my ribs. Who the hell was he talking to? I stood there, straining to hear more, but the words that followed were muffled. His tone dropped, barely above a whisper. My fingers curled into fists. This wasn't some late-night work call. Declan never whispered on work calls. Hell, he never even cared if I overheard his conversations before. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. After a few seconds, I heard his footsteps approaching. I barely had time to dart back to the bedroom before he rounded the corner. My pulse hammered as I slid under the covers, feigning sleep. A moment later, I felt the bed dip. His weight shifted beside me, but I kept my breathing steady. A few minutes passed, and then he exhaled slowly, relaxed like nothing had happened. I turned over, blinking up at him. Where were you? My voice came out soft, groggy, like I had just woken up. Bathroom, he muttered without hesitation.
A lie.
And the phone call? Declan barely flinched. Just a client had to smooth out some details for a case. I stared at him, watching for any sign of hesitation. He met my gaze, unreadable as always. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it really was work. But that whisper, that sentence. She doesn't suspect anything yet. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to roll over. My mind was screaming at me, but I ignored it. Not tonight. Not yet. The next morning I woke up before Declan. He was still fast asleep, his arm draped across the pillow where my head should have been. I slipped out of bed, grabbed my phone, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. I didn't usually check our bank accounts. Declan handled most of the finances, and I had never given it much thought, but something felt off. I scrolled through the transactions. My stomach tightened. $500, $1,200, $750, $2,000, a dozen withdrawals over the past 3 months. All relatively small, but frequent enough to raise a red flag. Declan and I shared expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries. But we also had separate accounts for personal spending. These transactions weren't for bills, weren't for investments, and definitely weren't for anything we had discussed. I took a shaky breath, my hands tightening around my phone. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I quickly locked my screen and turned to see Declan leaning against the doorway, rubbing his neck. Morning, he mumbled, voice thick with sleep. What's for breakfast? I set my phone down. I was about to ask you the same thing. He smirked, stepping forward to pour himself coffee. Guess it's your turn then. I watched him take a sip, his free hand resting on the counter. I checked our bank account this morning. Declan froze for half a second. Just long enough. His grip tightened around the mug before he forced a chuckle. And there are a lot of small withdrawals. I crossed my arms. Things I don't recognize. He barely hesitated. Just small investments. A few business opportunities. Business opportunities? Declan nodded, setting his cup down. Nothing to worry about. Short-term gains, that's all. He was lying. I knew it. I just didn't know why. The rest of the day, I tried to shake the unease, but Declan wasn't helping. He was glued to his phone, taking calls in the other room. His screen was always face down when he set it on the table, and every time I looked at him, I felt like there was a wall between us, one that hadn't been there before. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind wouldn't quiet down. Declan had always been confident, smooth, a man who knew how to talk his way out of anything. But I had been with him long enough to know when something was off, and something was definitely off. I turned to face him. He was already asleep, his breathing steady, his face calm, like a man with nothing to hide. I wasn't convinced. A voice in my head whispered the words I had been trying to push away all day. Am I being paranoid, or is something really wrong? The doubt refused to fade, even as the morning light filtered through my window. I had spent the entire night tossing and turning, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Declan's voice from the night before still echoed in my mind. Casual, dismissive, yet calculated. The kind of tone someone used when they were hiding something in plain sight. I forced myself out of bed and went about my morning routine, but my movements felt mechanical. My thoughts were stuck in a loop, replaying every interaction, every red flag I had ignored over the past few months. And then Declan strolled into the kitchen like nothing had changed. Morning, babe, he said, pressing a quick kiss to my temple. I was thinking we should probably get our financials in order, just in case of emergencies. I froze, my fingers tightening around my coffee mug. Our financials? I echoed carefully. Yeah, he said, leaning against the counter, sipping his coffee like he nodded like it was no big deal before changing the subject entirely. But my mind was already racing. This wasn't about us. This wasn't about just in case of emergencies. Declan was preparing for something, and whatever it was, he didn't want me to see it coming. That evening, Declan was uncharacteristically relaxed. He laughed at the TV, scrolled through his phone like nothing was wrong, and even suggested ordering takeout. He was playing the role of a doting husband perfectly, and that's what made my skin crawl. Something had shifted in him, the way he walked, the way he spoke. It was all too easy, too well rehearsed. Then it happened. Declan got up to take a shower, leaving his phone on the coffee table. He never left his phone unattended. Ever. I stared at it, my pulse quickening. The screen was face down, just like it had been for weeks. But then, as if the universe was throwing me a lifeline, a notification lit up the screen. A text message from a name I didn't recognize. Ilya Morrow. I didn't have time to think. I reached for the phone, my hands shaking as I tilted the screen just enough to read the message preview. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost there. My breath hitched. My chest tightened, so fast it hurt. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in on me. Who the hell was Ilya Morrow? And what did they mean by almost there? My fingers hovered over the screen for half a second, just long enough for the wildest thoughts to flash through my mind. Was this another woman? Was Declan planning to leave me? Was he hiding money? I heard the water shut off. Panic shot through me as I placed the phone back exactly where it had been and sank into the couch, gripping my knees to keep my hands from shaking. A minute later, Declan strolled back into the room, towel drying his hair. I forced myself to look at him. He was so calm, so at ease, completely unaware that I had just seen something I wasn't supposed to. Did you decide on dinner? He asked, ruffling his hair. I swallowed hard. Not yet. He grabbed his phone without a second glance, unlocking it effortlessly. No hesitation, like there wasn't a damn thing to worry about. But I knew better now. I spent the rest of the night trying to rationalize what I had seen. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe Elia was a colleague, a business partner. Maybe keeping me in the dark was about something completely different, something innocent. But deep down I knew better. The pieces were clicking together, one by one. The secrecy, the money disappearing, the call in the middle of the night, the way he was suddenly so interested in my finances. I should have confronted him right then and there. But if I was right, if Declan was really hiding something this big, then I needed proof. Real proof. So instead, I kept my mouth shut. I let him kiss me goodnight. Let him slip under the covers like nothing was wrong. And then I lay there, gripping my phone, whispering into the dark. Who the hell is Ilya Morrow? The next morning, the question still haunted me, gnawing at my every thought. I moved through my morning routine like a ghost, going through the motions, but my mind was locked onto one thing. Ilya Moreau. The name lingered in my brain like an unsolved puzzle. A piece that didn't fit but refused to be ignored. Declan sat across from me at breakfast, scrolling through his phone, perfectly at ease. I wondered if he had any idea I had seen that message. If he did, he was a damn good actor. But then, as if sensing my suspicion, he looked up and smiled. "Hey babe, can you sign something real quick?" I nearly choked on my coffee. "Sign what?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Just some financial updates for tax purposes," he said, sliding a document across the table. His tone was casual, but his fingers drummed against the table in an uneven rhythm. "A tell." I picked up the papers, my stomach tightening as I skimmed through the first page. Legal jargon filled the document, but one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't about taxes. I flipped to the last page. Property transfer agreement. My pulse pounded in my ears, my assets, my savings, even the condo. Everything would be moved into his name. I forced myself to look up. Declan was watching me, a careful smile plastered on his face. "Declan," I said, my voice too controlled. "What is this?" His smile didn't falter. "It's just a precaution, babe. A legal convenience. Nothing changes between us." I stared at him, my grip tightening around the paper. "Nothing changes. You're asking me to sign over everything to you." "Not everything," he said smoothly, as if that made it better. "Just consolidating things for protection. You know, in case something happens." My hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, from rage. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This wasn't me reading into things. This was planned. And he had the audacity to sit across from me and act like it was nothing. I placed the document back on the table, slow and deliberate. Then I met his gaze. "I'm not signing this." His smile twitched. His jaw clenched for a fraction of a second before he let out a short laugh. "Soraya, don't be dramatic. It's just paperwork." I held my ground. "Then why are you so eager for me to sign without reading it?" His expression hardened. "You really don't want to do this, Soraya." He leaned in slightly, his voice low and controlled, but there was something underneath it, a warning, a threat. I met his gaze, unflinching. "Is that a threat?" Declan didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression morphing into something dangerously unreadable. The smirk he had worn moments ago faded, replaced with an unsettling calm. "I just think you're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, his voice too smooth, too measured. I swallowed my anger, keeping my expression neutral. He still thought he was in control, that I was just another move on his carefully planned-out chessboard. I let the silence stretch, watching him. The way his fingers tapped idly against the table, the slight twitch in his jaw when I didn't respond. He was waiting for me to react, to get emotional, to panic, to break. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. So I smiled, just enough to make him shift uncomfortably. "You know what, Declan?" I said lightly, standing up and gathering the papers. "You're right. I do need to think about this." His eyes narrowed slightly. He wasn't expecting that, but I had already turned away, walking to the kitchen and placing the documents neatly on the counter. I wasn't going to argue. Not now, not yet. Because now I was the one in control. That night, Declan acted like nothing had happened. He moved through our home like we were still just another happy couple, making himself a drink, watching the news, scrolling through his phone like he didn't just try to con me into signing away everything I owned. But as I watched him, a realization settled in my chest like a weight. This had never been about saving our marriage. He wasn't trying to fix things. He was setting up his exit, and he wanted to take everything with him when he left. The next morning, I found him in the living room, sipping his coffee like he didn't have a single worry in the world. But when I sat across from him, he glanced up, immediately sensing that something had shifted. "We need to talk," he said, setting his cup down. I tilted my head. Oh, exhaled, as if this was difficult for him, as if he was the one struggling. I think we should separate. There it was. He said it like a man delivering a well-rehearsed speech, every word perfectly measured. It's not working anymore, he continued, his tone even. You have to see that. I stared at him, unmoving. He wasn't asking for a divorce. He was telling me it was happening. I let a beat pass, then another before I finally spoke. You've been planning this, haven't you? A flicker of something crossed his face, gone before I could name it. It's for the best, Soraya. We've grown apart. Grown apart. That's what he was going with. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. You mean you want out, but you want to make sure you don't leave empty-handed. His lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't deny it. I could have screamed. I could have thrown the nearest object across the room. But I didn't because something had shifted inside me. A steel resolve that hadn't been there before. So I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head slightly. Then, as calmly as I could, I said the words that would change everything. I already moved my assets. Declan's entire posture stiffened. His breath hitched. Not enough for someone else to notice, but I did. What do you mean? His voice was too sharp, too controlled. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Exactly what it sounds like. His jaw clenched. I saw it then, the second he realized he had lost. He had spent months orchestrating this, setting up every little detail to ensure he came out on top. But he had underestimated me, and he hated that. A long silence stretched between us. Then, finally, Declan exhaled sharply and stood up. He grabbed his coffee, took a slow sip, then turned to me with a look that sent ice through my veins. His smile returned, but this time it was colder, calculated. You're going to regret this, Soraya. She wasn't sure if it was a threat or a desperate bluff. Either way, she was ready. Declan had played his hand, and now it was her turn. The morning air felt heavier than usual as I moved through my routine. Coffee tasted bitter, and the silence of the apartment pressed against me like a weight. I told myself I wouldn't let his words from the night before get to me. But then came the knock at the door. Sharp, measured, official. I set my coffee down and took a breath before opening it. A man in a navy blazer stood on the other side, holding a thick envelope. Soraya. Keller. Yes, he extended the envelope. Expression blank. You've been served. My fingers tightened around the documents as I watched him walk away. The weight of the envelope felt heavier than it should have been. I didn't have to open it to know what it was. Still, I forced myself to sit at the kitchen table, exhaling sharply before sliding my nail under the flap and pulling out the papers. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I skimmed down the page, eyes landing on the financial demands. Declan wasn't just leaving. He wanted half of everything. The condo, the car, 50% of our shared assets. And because he had the audacity, spousal support, I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Of course, he thought he could take everything. He had been planning this for months, probably longer. The man I married was cold, but this was calculated. The smell of polished wood and freshly printed documents filled the air as I sat across from my attorney. She flipped through the papers, barely suppressing a smirk, as she reached the financial breakdown. Well, she said, tapping her nails against the desk. He's got nothing. I raised a brow. Just like that. She glanced up, amused. Just like that. You moved everything into a trust before he filed. That means legally he has no access. He can fight for spousal support, but considering your income history compared to his, it's not happening. I let out a slow breath, my shoulders finally releasing the tension I had been holding on to since that knock on my door. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly in control. Declan had spent all this time thinking he was the one orchestrating the game. He had underestimated me that evening. I had just finished pouring myself a glass of wine when the front door slammed open. I didn't even flinch. Declan stood there, fury rolling off him in waves. His tie was loosened and his jaw was clenched so tight, I swore I heard his teeth grind. You think you're so smart, don't you? His voice was sharp, venomous. I took a slow sip of my wine, savoring the way his anger twisted around him like a storm. I think I'm finally protecting myself. His hands curled into fists at his sides. You planned this. I set my glass down, tilting my head. So did you? Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken accusations. Then, finally, he exhaled sharply, his eyes darkening as he muttered. This isn't over. I exhaled slowly. I had won the first battle, but the war had just begun for the first time in weeks. I felt a small sense of relief, knowing that Declan had lost his financial grip on me, but I should have known better than to think he would walk away quietly. The first sign of trouble came at work. It started with looks, not the usual passing glances, but lingering stares, whispers that cut off the second I entered the room. By mid-morning, my assistant, Rachel, hesitated before stepping into my office. Hey, we think you should know something. I glanced up from my laptop, already exhausted. What is it? She shifted uncomfortably. There's a rumor going around. I wasn't going to say anything, but she trailed off, wringing her hands. Just tell me. Rachel hesitated, then sighed. People are saying you took money from your joint accounts, that you were, she swallowed hard, laundering funds. I stared at her. The words landed like a slap. What? I don't believe it, she added quickly. But Declan, he's been talking to people, lawyers, mutual friends. The story's spreading. My stomach twisted, fury rising in my chest like wildfire. Declan wasn't just trying to take my money. He was trying to ruin me. By the time I got to my lawyer's office, I was barely holding it together. This needs to stop now. I slammed the stack of printed screenshots onto the desk, my hands shaking with rage. My lawyer, Patricia, glanced at them and let out a dry chuckle. Well, he's certainly desperate. He's slandering me. Yes, but we can use that. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her desk. If he's running around making false claims, he's opening himself up to defamation charges. We send a cease and desist first. If he ignores it, we escalate. I clench my jaw. I don't want this to drag out in court. I just want him to stop. Patricia sighed. He's trying to bait you, Soraya. He wants you to react emotionally. She's right. I turned to see Beatrice standing by the door with a knowing look. You can't let him dictate your next move, she said, stepping forward. You react too fast and he wins. I swallowed my anger, nodding stiffly, but inside I was seething. Declan wanted a fight. He was about to get one. I found him at La Rue, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, laughing over drinks with two colleagues. The sight of him sitting there, completely unfazed, like he hadn't spent the past few days dragging my name through the mud, made my blood boil. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't scream. I didn't need to. I simply walked up to the table, leaned down, and whispered, You have no idea what you've just started. Declan's smirk faltered for a split second before he masked it with an easy grin. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, eyes gleaming with challenge. Let's see what you've got then. I had given him one last warning. Now I was done playing fair. Declan had spent weeks trying to manipulate, intimidate, and control me. He had underestimated me at every turn. Now, after failing to take my money, after smearing my name, he was taking one final shot. A desperate man is a dangerous one. I was halfway through my morning coffee when my phone rang. Patricia, I answered, sensing the urgency before she even spoke. You need to come in, my lawyer said, without preamble. Declan just filed a motion for a full financial audit. The words sent a sharp jolt through my body. I set my mug down carefully, inhaling deeply. On what grounds? Patricia exhaled. He's claiming you mismanaged joint funds and that you owe him a financial settlement. It's complete nonsense, but that's not the point. Of course it wasn't. He's trying to drain me, I muttered. Legal fees, time, stress. He knows he can't win, so he wants to wear me down. Exactly. A sharp bitterness curled in my chest. Declan never played to win outright. He played to exhaust his opponent. Not this time. I'll be there in an hour, I said before hanging up. By the time I walked into Patricia's office, she already had Declan's motions spread across her desk, annotated in red. Here's the good news, she said, looking up. He doesn't have a single piece of legitimate evidence. The bad news? This could still drag out for weeks, maybe months, if the court entertains his tactics. I clenched my fists. What's our next move? We counterfile and request an immediate dismissal, she said. We also demand that he pay for all legal costs if the court deems this a stall tactic. I smirked. Let's do it. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting across from Declan in a courtroom. He was dressed sharp, his tie a little too tight, his smirk barely concealed. He thought this was his moment. His lawyer stood first. Your Honor, my client has reason to believe that Mrs. Keller improperly moved assets to avoid a fair divorce settlement. We are requesting a full forensic audit of all financial transfers made in the past 6 months. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. Patricia, calm as ever, adjusted her glasses and stood. Your Honor, all of my client's financial moves were made before Mr. Keller even filed for divorce. There is no evidence of mismanagement or fraud. She slid a thick binder forward. Additionally, we request that this motion be dismissed with prejudice and that Mr. Keller be required to cover all legal fees, as this is a clear attempt at financial harassment. The judge took their time reviewing the documents. Their expression unreadable. The room was tense, silent. Declan was watching me, waiting for me to squirm. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Finally, the judge looked up. The court finds no grounds for a full financial audit. The motion is denied. Furthermore, due to lack of evidence, Mr. Keller will be responsible for all legal fees associated with this claim. A sharp clap of the gavel. Just like that, Declan had lost again. Outside the courtroom, Declan walked past me without a word. But as he passed, he muttered just loud enough for me to hear. You think this is over? Just wait. I had won this round, but I knew Declan still had one last move left. Men like him don't walk away quietly. They don't accept defeat. They regroup, re-strategize, and come back with something even worse. And Declan? He had been plotting this too long to let it end here. I didn't have to wait long to find out what his final move was. The call came the next morning. Soraya, we have a problem, Patricia said. I gripped the phone tighter. What now? There was a pause, then the sound of papers shuffling. Declan and Ilya have filed a formal complaint. They're accusing you of financial fraud, according to their evidence. You've been falsifying financial records for months. I felt the air leave my lungs. If this accusation stuck, I wouldn't just lose money. I could be facing actual legal consequences. They submitted documents, Patricia continued, her voice tight. If the court takes this seriously, you'll be forced into a criminal investigation. The world tilted slightly. I pressed my fingers against my temple, willing myself to stay calm. And the documents? Are they real? A scoff on the other end. Absolutely not, but they're good. Someone doctored them well, of course. Ilya, the invisible hand guiding Declan's every move. But Patricia added, I had Beatrice take a look at them before calling you, and she found something. A flicker of hope. What? She recognized the timestamps on the financial transfers. Someone forged them, but they didn't realize one key detail. Those accounts didn't even exist when those transactions supposedly took place. I let out a sharp exhale. That was it. That was the mistake that would ruin them. My fear burned away, replaced by something sharper. Declan wanted a war? Fine. I was about to end it. By the time I arrived at Patricia's office, I had made a decision. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to bury them. I want to go on the offensive, I said, placing my palms flat on her desk. Not just to clear my name. I want to take them down. Patricia studied me for a moment, then nodded. Good, because we have enough to do it. She motioned to a folder. We contacted a forensic financial analyst. They confirmed what Beatrice found. The documents were doctored. She smiled, sharp and satisfied. So here's what we do. We file a motion proving the documents are fraudulent. Then we sue Declan and Ilya for defamation and falsifying legal evidence. I nodded. And I want full damages. Patricia leaned back, clearly pleased. I thought you might say that. 2 weeks later, I faced Declan in court for what would be the last time. I watched him closely as Patricia laid out her case. She spoke with precision, her voice carrying across the room. These documents, submitted as evidence against my client, were fabricated. We have irrefutable proof that the financial transactions listed never happened. The forensic analyst took the stand, detailing every false timestamp, every manipulated number. Declan's lawyer squirmed. They knew they were losing. Then came the final blow. Patricia placed a new folder on the judge's desk. Your Honor, in light of these fraudulent accusations, my client is countersuing Mr. Keller and his associate, Ilya Morrow, for defamation and the submission of falsified legal evidence. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Declan's lawyer turned to him, whispering something urgent. Declan's jaw was locked, his face pale. Finally, his lawyer stood and cleared his throat. Your Honor, my client wishes to withdraw his claims.
Of course he did.
He had no choice. The judge nodded. Motion dismissed.
Furthermore, Mr.
Keller will be responsible for all legal costs. Declan had lost completely. As we exited the courthouse, Declan walked past me without a word. I didn't stop him. I didn't need to. I let him take a few steps before I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. We're done here. For the first time in months, I felt something I had almost forgotten.
Peace.
No more court hearings. No more threats. No more waking up in the middle of the night, dreading what Declan would do next. I had won. It didn't feel like some grand victory, not in the way I had imagined. There were no fireworks, no dramatic final words, just silence. The kind that comes after a storm when the sky is still heavy, but the thunder is gone. And for the first time, that silence didn't scare me. 2 days later, I met with Patricia for the last time. She slid a final stack of papers across her desk. It's done. Declan signed the settlement. I exhaled slowly, my fingers hovering over the documents before finally picking them up. I scanned through the details. Even though I already knew the outcome, Declan got nothing, not a dime. His financial claims dismissed. His defamation case backfired. His reputation ruined. He had tried to destroy me, and in the end, he was the one left with nothing. Patricia leaned back in her chair, watching me. How do you feel? I let out a quiet laugh, more exhale than sound. Lighter, she smiled. Good. You deserve that. I nodded, slipping the documents into my bag. This was it. The final step. I stood, extending my hand. Thank you, Patricia, for everything. She shook it firmly. Go enjoy your life, Soraya. You've earned it. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. That evening, Beatrice and my mother insisted on a victory dinner. Margot greeted me with a warm hug as I stepped into her home, her eyes full of relief. It's over, she whispered. Yes, I murmured. It is. Beatrice poured champagne, raising her glass with a mischievous grin. To freedom and to never letting a man think he can outsmart you again. I clinked my glass against hers, laughing. I'll drink to that. We ate. We talked. We reminisced. And for the first time in months, I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for the next hit. The war was over. Later that night, I stood on my balcony, gazing at the Chicago skyline. The city lights shimmered, stretching infinitely into the horizon. Everything felt different. I was no longer the woman who had ignored the warning signs, no longer the woman who had believed in the illusion of safety, of permanence. I had lost things. Trust, time, the version of love I thought I had. But I had gained more. Strength, clarity, control. My phone vibrated on the table beside me. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I didn't hesitate, blocked. I turned back to my laptop, opening a blank document. A new chapter, a new story, my story. As I closed my laptop, I whispered, "This is my story now." Before we wrap up, let me leave you with something to think about. Life has a way of testing us in the moments we least expect. Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who betray us the deepest. But here's what I've learned. Strength isn't about avoiding betrayal, it's about how you rise after it. When I stood at the edge of my marriage, I could have let it break me. I could have let fear and doubt consume me, but instead I chose to fight. Not just for my finances, but for my dignity, my freedom, and my future. And if there's one thing I hope you take from this story, it's this. You are stronger than you think. If you've ever been blindsided by betrayal, if you've ever felt like the rug was pulled from under you, know this. You are not alone. Life may throw its worst at you, but it's in those moments that you discover who you truly are. And sometimes walking away from what no longer serves you is the greatest victory of all. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to fight for yourself, even when the odds were against you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one of them. And if this story resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And, of course, if you want to hear more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. There's so much more to come. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart, and never let anyone take away your power.